Hi everyone, Michael here. In this video, I'm going to be going over this developing story of the Suez Canal blockage. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of all the facts and statistics and how big this ship is and how much it weighs and all this stuff. I'm not going to get into all those boring details. I'm going to get into the real issues that's going on with this Suez Canal and what it really means for you, what it means for me, and what the impact is going to be globally. So it's now coming up to a week since the Ever Given has been blocked in the Suez Canal. And people have been wondering what really caused this. They've said it's a bit of wind, it was a dust storm, it was human error or technical error, but they haven't really come out and give us any hard facts of what's really caused this massive issue. And I've been following this story, and to me, this seems like too much of a coincidence with everything that's going on in the world right now. And there are some huge questions I'm asking myself to what's really going on, and I know all of you are asking what's really going on as well, and many of you have put your thoughts down below and stated what you think is really happening. Well, firstly, I don't think a bit of wind or dust storm would blow over a ship that's 1,300 feet long and weighs over 220,000 tons. And also for the ship to all of a sudden turn almost sideways in a straight canal, that doesn't seem very likely either. So this makes me think there must be another reason that's caused this that they're not telling us. And also the place and the timing of this incident happening couldn't have come at a worse time. Already global supply chains have been greatly disrupted from the global pandemic, and there's been huge shortages everywhere and prices have been rising rapidly. And just to let you know how much of an effect this has on global trade, there's around $10 billion of global goods that go through this passage every day. That equates to around $400 million an hour. And I'm going to show you some crazy footage that shows how much of a blockage and how much traffic there is from ships trying to get through on either side of the passage. So as you can see there, and what they've stated is there's around 350 ships stuck on either end trying to get through. This caused oil prices to jump over 6%, and you better believe that your petrol prices are going to be going up soon. And it's around 12 to 15% of global trade uses this essential passage point. Okay, so those are some of the facts, but now let's get into why I think this is really happening at such a crucial time. This comes at a time since it's been a year since the pandemic began, and what has happened since the pandemic began and what has been out there in the media. Shortages, FOMO, get in now, buy now, you got to get it while it lasts, and so on. This has created huge amounts of FOMO and has lifted retail spending and consumer confidence, and people going out there and buying up everything they can. And this is good for the economy, because really in 2019, we were already going to be heading into global recession anyways in 2020, but this just really sped up the process, and it gave an excuse for central banks and around the world to print massive amounts of money and inject massive amounts of liquidity and stimulus and overheat the economy. But unfortunately, what has happened is they've actually bit off more than they can chew. And something that was absolutely crazy and what was unprecedented is the Federal Reserve actually bailed out the stock market directly. And you may be thinking, no, they didn't buy stocks. But what they actually did is they brought corporate debt. That means any of the big corporations in the US that were too big to fail. And I just finished watching a documentary, it's called Panic, and it's about the 2008 financial crisis. I really recommend you go watch that. That just has all the government officials pretty much admitting that they lied to the public and they did whatever they could to make sure Wall Street didn't fail. So again, they bailed out these big corporations, and that is why the stock market has been booming, and while the housing market has been booming because they've also been buying mortgage-backed securities and they've plummeted interest rates. But now we're getting to a key point, and what I think is actually happening now, and what they think is happening, is they've actually overheated the economy, and we're going to be getting some really high inflation numbers. But unlike past times, there's so much amount of debt in the system, they cannot afford to lift interest rates, because it would send the housing market plummeting and it will send the stock market plummeting, because margin debt is at all-time highs and mortgage debt is at all-time highs, and also debt to income ratio is at all-time highs. And I'm just going to show you a few charts and a few statistics that really show how much money they printed and how unprecedented it has been, and shows why there's going to be huge inflation coming that they're going to try to cover up. So I'm going to show the increase in money supply and the central bank's balance sheets for Australia, because I know most of my viewers are from Australia and the US, but this has happened globally. Okay, so as you can see here, the M1 money supply in Australia has gone absolutely parabolic in 2020. It's gone from around 1,189 billion all the way up to 1,408 billion in 2021. So that equates to around 1.1 trillion to 1.4 trillion. And M1 money supply, that's supply of all physical money and deposits in accounts, or all money that can be quickly liquidated into hard cash. But have a look at this. This is absolutely nuts. Have a look at the M1 money supply in the States. And for all my viewers in the States, you better believe inflation is coming, and this is absolutely crazy. The M1 money supply has gone from 6,750 billion in January all the way up to 18,411 billion in February. And that's obviously from all the stimulus that's happening. And they're saying, look, there's not going to be inflation. Well, what they used to measure inflation was by the increase in money supply. And this is almost tripling the M1 money supply. There's gonna be inflation coming, you better believe it. So that means 6,750 billion is pretty much 6.7 trillion. And now it's around 18.4 trillion. This is absolutely crazy and absolutely dwarfs the amount of stimulus they did in 2008. And it's funny how quick times have changed. People were very upset for what they did in 2008, but they've done 10 times more in 2020 and nobody bat an eye. And also what's been happening is the central bank's balance sheets have been skyrocketing. And soon, who knows, maybe the central banks will own everything. And look at this, it's pretty much a vertical line of the RBA central bank balance sheet. It's gone from around 150 billion all the way up to 400 billion from 2020 to 2021. And it's not slowing down. Again, with the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, it's gone pretty much vertical from around 3 trillion to nearly $8 trillion. And that's from buying all the government bonds, corporate bonds, and mortgage-backed securities, and much more. And isn't it funny that there's calls to now increase taxes to fuel this spending, but they can print $5 trillion out of nowhere and expect you to pay up to 50% of your hard-earned money in tax. And guess what? They could tax you 100%, but if they keep up their irresponsible spending, it doesn't matter how much they tax you, they spend 150% of their earning. And same as this as an individual, no matter how much you earn, if you spend more than you earn, you're gonna go broke. And you're also gonna default and end up bankrupt. But don't worry, you owe nothing and be happy. Also, in 2020 and 2021, household debt in the US has gone from around 75% to 78%. And private debt to GDP in Australia over the past 10 years has been steadily climbing from around 180% to 200%. And in the States, private debt has been steadily climbing as well, from around 216% of GDP to 220% of GDP. And again, going back to the Suez Canal blockage incident, it just seems to me like there's too much coincidence with everything that's happened in the past year. And now all of a sudden we're going to start getting high inflation. Every time the government and central banks step up, they need something to blame it on. So what could happen is we may start getting this high inflation data, but the central banks will be like, look, no, this is not real inflation. This is just temporary. This is just from supply chain disruption and supply shortages. That's a complete lie. They have overcooked the economy. They have printed out too much money, and the cost of living is going to skyrocket and prices are going to skyrocket. I know it and you all know it. And the CPI, which I call CPI, they can manipulate it all they want. They can have a basket of goods and just look at, okay, what's dropped the most? We'll put that in the basket and then say, look, oh, inflation's only 1%. Meanwhile, housing, utilities, food, school fees, insurance is all going up 5 to 10%. Okay, so what can we do to prepare right now? Well, if there's anything you need, who knows, there could be some big supply shortages coming. So I'd go ahead and get that now before prices increase, or in case it may not be there in the shops. Doesn't mean go out there and panic buy, but just make sure you have everything that you need. Also, what are we gonna do with inflation? Well, what you're gonna wanna do, again, this is not financial advice, but just what I'm doing, you're gonna want an inflation hedge. And what is that normally? Well, that is precious metals and things like Bitcoin is an inflation hedge. Also, you can go into defensive stocks that will perform well in a recession and in a market crash. And we are seeing in the stock market, there is a change from high growth tech stocks is now cycling into value defensive stocks. But that is just my opinion with the facts and figures that we have right now. Who knows what's going to happen over the coming weeks? I'll have to follow this situation more closely and I'll keep you all updated on what's coming. For my loyal viewers and subscribers still watching, you're awesome. If you haven't already, please tap that like and subscribe button. I'll keep you all updated on the latest housing market news here in Australia and the US and global finance news. If you're bored and figuring out what you want to do, I'll pop up some of my other videos here. I'll see you there.